Give ear to my words, O Lord. Consider my meditation. Hearken unto the voice of my cry, my King and my God. For unto you will I pray. Welcome to Daily Prayer, your moment to breathe, reflect, and reconnect with God. Psalm 5 begins with an urgent cry for help. David, in the midst of his struggles, calls upon the Lord to hear his prayer. His words are filled with a sense of desperation, yet there is a deep trust in God's ability to hear and respond. David's morning prayer is not just a ritual. It is an outpouring of his heart to God, seeking his intervention in a time of great need. Have you ever felt like your prayers are the only thing standing between you and the overwhelming forces around you? Perhaps you feel surrounded by difficulties, by people who oppose your faith, or by the weight of your own struggles. David knows this feeling well. He is a man surrounded by enemies, by those who do not seek God's truth. And yet, in the midst of all this, he chooses to cry out to the Lord. Give ear to my words, O Lord, consider my meditation. He asks for God's attention, for God to listen closely to his plea. David's trust in God is evident here. He calls God his king and his God, recognizing that God holds all authority. In a world full of opposition, it's easy to forget that God is in control. But David reminds us that, no matter how difficult the situation, God is our king, and he is the one who holds the power to change our circumstances. When we face opposition, we are not helpless. We can cry out to God, knowing that he hears us, that God is, and that he will act on our behalf. David's prayer is personal. For unto you will I pray, he declares. Prayer is not just an obligation or a formality. It is an intimate conversation with the Creator, a chance to pour out our hearts and to seek his guidance. When we are in trouble, we don't need to turn to worldly solutions first. We can turn to God, knowing that he is the one who can provide the answers, the strength, and the deliverance we need. David continues, My voice shalt thou hear in the morning, O Lord. In the morning will I direct my prayer unto thee, and will look up. This is a beautiful declaration of faith and trust. David begins his day with God, setting aside the first moments of his morning to seek God as guidance and to offer his prayers. In doing so, David is not just seeking help. He is aligning his heart with God's will, acknowledging that only God can provide the direction he needs for the day ahead. There is something powerful about beginning our day in prayer. It is a reminder that our first priority should be seeking God, not just in times of crisis, but in the everyday moments of life. When we give God the first part of our day, we are inviting him into our thoughts, our plans, and our actions. David's example teaches us to turn to God at the start of each day, to make our prayers the first words we speak, and to trust that God will guide us through whatever challenges we may face. David's words continue with a description of the character of God. For you are not a God who takes pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with you. David reminds himself that God is holy, that he cannot tolerate sin or evil. This is an important truth, especially when we find ourselves surrounded by those who seem to prosper in their sin. It can be difficult to see the unrighteous succeed, while the righteous struggle. But David affirms that God does not delight in evil. He is not indifferent to the actions of the wicked. God sees the injustice, and he will bring judgment in his perfect timing. David goes on to describe the wicked in stark terms. The foolish shall not stand in thy sight. Thou hadst all workers of iniquity. Thou shalt destroy them that speak leasing lies. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. These verses remind us that God's justice is not passive. He hates sin, and he will deal with it. The wicked cannot stand in his presence, for God is holy, and his holiness demands justice. While it may seem like the wicked are getting away with their actions, David's words reassure us that God will not let sin go unpunished. He will act in his time, bringing justice to those who do evil. Yet, David's trust in God is not based solely on God's justice. It is rooted in God's mercy and grace. But as for me, I will come into thy house in the multitude of thy mercy, and in thy fear will I worship toward thy holy temple. David understands that, despite the wickedness around him, he can come before God because of God's mercy. David knows that he does not deserve to be in God's presence, but he also knows that God is merciful and that he can approach God with humility and reverence. In the midst of a world filled with sin and injustice, we, too, can approach God with the same confidence. We may not be perfect, but we can come to God because of His mercy. He welcomes the brokenhearted, the repentant, and those who seek Him in humility. God's grace allows us to stand before Him, not in our own righteousness, but in the righteousness of Christ. You shall destroy them that speak lies. The Lord will abhor the bloody and deceitful man. David continues his prayer, emphasizing God's righteous judgment against the wicked. He describes those who speak lies as objects of God's wrath. The wicked, those who practice deceit and violence, will not stand in God's presence. This reminder is not just for David's enemies, but also for us. In a world where lies, deceit, and injustice often seem to thrive, it is important to remember that God does not tolerate sin. God's holiness demands justice. When we are surrounded by falsehood and injustice, it can be easy to feel discouraged or helpless. But David's words remind us that God sees every injustice. He knows the truth, and in His time, He will bring judgment upon those who are unrepentant. God's justice is not blind, it is righteous and fair. He will punish the wicked, just as He will bless those who walk in His truth. David's confidence in God's justice leads him to pray, "But as for me, I will come into thy house in the multitude of thy mercy." Even as he calls for God's judgment on the wicked, David finds peace in God's mercy. He acknowledges that, despite the evil around him, he can approach God because of His abundant grace. David does not rely on his own righteousness to stand before God. Instead, he depends on God's mercy, knowing that God will forgive and restore those who come to Him with a repentant heart. This is a beautiful reminder for us today. Even when the world seems full of injustice, we can find hope in God's mercy. While we are called to stand for truth and righteousness, we are also called to approach God with humility, recognizing that it is only through His mercy that we can come before Him. We do not have to rely on our own strength or righteousness. We can trust in God's grace to lift us up. David continues his prayer, "Lead me, O Lord, in thy righteousness because of mine enemies. Make thy ways straight before my face." David's plea is for God to guide him in righteousness. He acknowledges that, in the face of opposition, he needs God's direction. The way of righteousness is not always clear, especially when we are surrounded by those who oppose us or live in ways that are contrary to God's will. David asks God to make his path straight before him, to guide him in the right direction, and give him wisdom in how to navigate the challenges of life. In our own lives, we often face decisions that are difficult or unclear. The world offers many paths, many voices that tell us what we should do. But David's prayer teaches us to seek God's guidance. We are not alone in our struggles. We can ask God to lead us, to show us the way of righteousness, and to give us the courage to walk in His truth. When we face opposition, we can trust that God will guide our steps and help us stay on the path of righteousness. David's prayer shifts, asking God to deal with the wicked, for there is no faithfulness in their mouth. Their inward part is very wickedness. Their throat is an open sepulchre. They flatter with their tongue. David describes the wicked as people who are deceitful, whose words are empty and whose hearts are full of wickedness. Their speech is like an open grave dead and full of corruption. They speak lies, flatter others for their own gain, and have no true integrity. In a world filled with deceit, it can be difficult to know who to trust. People may promise one thing and deliver another. The world often celebrates deceit and manipulation, but David's prayer reminds us that God sees the heart. He knows the truth behind every word and every action. The wicked may seem to prosper for a time, but God knows their true intentions, and He will deal with them accordingly. David continues, "Destroy thou them, O God. Let them fall by their own counsels. Cast them out in the multitude of their transgressions, for they have rebelled against thee." David's call for judgment is strong. He asks God to deal with the wicked according to their actions. This is a reminder that God's justice will prevail. Though the wicked may prosper for a time, their day of reckoning will come. God will bring them to account for their actions, and He will judge them in righteousness. But David's prayer is not just about judgment. It is also about protection and blessing for the righteous. But let all those that put their trust in Thee rejoice. Let them ever shout for joy, because thou defendest them. Let thine also that love thy name be joyful in thee. David shifts his focus from the wicked to the righteous, reminding them that those who trust in God have a reason to rejoice. God is their defender, and he will protect them from the evil around them. Those who love God's name can find joy in his protection and his presence. This is a beautiful declaration of faith. Despite the chaos and wickedness in the world, those who trust in God have a reason to rejoice. God is their shield, their defender, and their refuge. We do not have to fear the attacks of the enemy. We can rejoice in the knowledge that God is with us, that he is protecting us, and that his love surrounds us. David ends his prayer with a final declaration of God's blessing. For thou, Lord, wilt bless the righteous. With favor wilt thou compass him as with a shield. David knows that no matter what the wicked do, God will bless the righteous. He will surround them with his favor, just as a shield surrounds a warrior in battle. God's protection is not temporary. It is constant. His favor is always with those who trust in him. For you, O Lord, will bless the righteous. With favor will you surround him as with a shield. David's declaration of God's blessing upon the righteous is a powerful affirmation of God's faithful protection. In the midst of opposition, David trusts that God will not leave him without defense. God's favor will surround the righteous, protecting them from the attacks of the enemy. This is a promise we can hold on to today. No matter what we face, God's favor will shield us. The imagery of God surrounding the righteous with favor like a shield is rich with meaning. A shield is not only a defensive tool, it is also a symbol of protection, strength, and security. When we walk in God's righteousness, we can be assured that his favor surrounds us in every situation. The enemy may try to attack, but God's shield of favor will guard us. This is a beautiful picture of the peace and security we have when we trust in God. David's confidence in God's protection and favor is evident, even as he faces opposition from enemies, even as he cries out for justice and deliverance. He knows that God will bless him. He knows that God is faithful to protect and to bless those who seek his righteousness. This should be a comfort to all believers. When we put our trust in God, we can rest assured that his favor surrounds us. We don't have to face our struggles alone. God is with us, guarding us with his divine favor. David also expresses his trust in God's ability to deal with the wicked. For thou, Lord, wilt bless the righteous. With favor wilt thou compass him as with a shield. This is a reminder that though the wicked may seem to prosper for a time, their end is certain. God will deal with them according to their deeds. But for the righteous, God's protection and blessing are certain. This should encourage us to stay faithful to God, even in the face of opposition. It may be tempting to compromise or to seek revenge, but David's prayer shows us the importance of trusting God's timing and his justice. We do not need to fight our own battles. God is our defender. He will fight on our behalf and bless us with his favor, protecting us from harm. David's confidence in God's favor is not based on his own righteousness, but on God's grace. He knows that it is only by God's mercy that he can stand in God's presence. This is an important reminder for us today. We are not righteous because of our own works, but because of God's grace and mercy. It is through Christ's righteousness that we are able to approach God's throne of grace, and it is through Christ that we receive God's favor and protection. The blessing of God is not just a promise for David, it is a promise for all believers. Those who trust in God, those who seek his righteousness, will experience his favor. We may face trials and tribulations, but we can rest in the assurance that God's favor surrounds us. His protection is constant, and his blessing is always with us. As we reflect on this, we are reminded that God is our shield, our protector, and our defender. When we trust in him, we can be confident that his favor will be with us, guarding us from harm. The enemy may try to attack, but God's favor will keep us safe. We don't have to worry about the outcome, because we know that God will bless the righteous and protect them with his favor. As we come to the final verses of Psalm 5, David's prayer concludes with a deep sense of assurance in God's justice and protection. David has cried out to God for deliverance, trusting in his righteousness. and now he expresses his confidence that God will act on his behalf. For you, O Lord, will bless the righteous. With favor will you surround him as with a shield. David's confidence is rooted in the unchanging character of God. He knows that God does not ignore the cries of the righteous, nor does he allow the wicked to prosper forever. God's justice is certain, and his protection is assured for those who seek his will. This assurance gives David peace, and it gives us peace as well. No matter what we face, we can trust that God is with us. He will surround us with his favor like a shield, keeping us safe from harm. This final verse is not just a personal affirmation for David. It is a promise for all who trust in God. You, O Lord, will bless the righteous. It is not our own strength or righteousness that brings us blessing, but God's grace and favor. We are made righteous through Christ, and it is through him that we receive God's abundant blessings. This is the good news of the gospel, that despite our shortcomings and failures, we can stand before God in the righteousness of Christ and receive his protection, his peace, and his favor. David has confidence in God as justice is also a reminder that we do not need to fight our own battles. When we are surrounded by enemies, whether they are external forces or internal struggles, we can place our trust in God, knowing that he will act on our behalf. We don't need to take matters into our own hands. God is our defender, and he will protect us from the attacks of the enemy. His favor will shield us, and his justice will prevail. As we conclude this prayer, let us remember that God is our refuge, our shield, and our strength. In a world full of turmoil and opposition, we can find peace in his presence. We can trust that he sees our struggles, hears our cries, and will act to protect and deliver us. Like David, we can approach God with confidence, knowing that he will bless the righteous and surround them with his favor. Let us also remember that, like David, we are called to live righteously and seek God's will in all things. When we trust in God's righteousness, we are not only protected but also aligned with his purpose. God's favor rests upon those who seek him and walk in his truth. As we trust in God's protection and blessing, let us also strive to live lives that honor him, so that his favor may continue to surround us like a shield.